Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this Friday night live discussion. We are going to be discussing the consultation that the government has now sent out to the landlords and tenants to get their feedback on Bill 97. And at the same time, who else better to discuss this with me and other housing issues than Lena Guirguis? So if it's anyone that I'm going to be sitting here and going into details of what this consultation paper looks like, and also give you guys some feedback that we personally feel, so it can help you when you're providing your feedback through the description in the video. If you're seeing on Facebook or YouTube, you're going to be able to see the links for each topic. So there's about 6 of them, and you're going to be able to click on that link, get the information, and there's also a little spot there where you can give a direct comment and feedback regarding this proposed legislation that our lovely government has now pushed out the door. So Lena, thank you so much for joining us on this Ontario Landlords Watch live discussion on housing, like we love to do, because I know so much of a conversation happens in the group, but we love to tune into a Facebook Live or YouTube Live in order to get a really good discussion happening, so that if we do have elected officials and media watching our videos, they're going to be able to not only see it one way. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I mean, it's always fun to just, have these discussions together, but why not do it in an environment where other people can also participate, right? Because I'm sure we're all scratching our heads and wondering what's going on and thinking, okay, 1 step forward, 10 steps back. How come?
Oh my God. We're on the phone, and I was just on the phone with Felix Wartzman today too. And it's like, we're talking about this, and I'm like, okay, we got to get Felix on now next Thursday, because like our conversations and what we're saying and how we're saying it, like it has to be live. Yeah. And I want to make sure I'm bringing as many voices out there as much as we possibly can, because I know that, our landlords, our investors, our housing providers are almost very silent. It's not that they're silent, they're always just trying to silence us, and any changes that are happening, it's always for tenants, not knowing that what they're doing is obviously backfiring and it's going to cause more hardship on our tenants.
It is. It really is. It is. Our scales are not balanced. So as more and more tip one way versus the other, housing providers, that's what we are, right? Landlords, sure. Investors, sure. But at the end of the day, we are housing providers. I think that's what our government needs to start looking at us as. We provide housing to others. And as such, we should be able to have a certain level of comfort. We should be able to sleep at night and not have anxiety and, worries and everything else. And the more that they're trying to, fix issues for a very small percentage. I'm not saying that there aren't bad landlords out there, right? Like there is a very small sliver out there who are not so great. And there's also a small sliver of tenants who are not so great. And then you have a bigger group who maybe just don't fully understand. And because of it, things get a little bit mucky and their intentions are good and we create problems. And what they're doing is they're blindfolding us, gagging us, and tying our hands behind our back because of that one tiny little sliver.
It's forcing private housing providers to be a social agency with no compensation. And it's not even for the concept that, we do have the bad ones, but they're not even looking at how they're managing their current housing stock, so wow. It's like you want to, put the rules and regulations on private, but they're not even trying to do it's do as I say, but
not as I do.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, okay, so I don't want to shame people, but wasn't the city of Toronto listed as the absolute worst housing provider in the city for ever, Toronto Housing Corporation, because their places were falling apart and nobody was maintaining them?
Board it up.
Do it. Why are you putting the onus on everybody else? And I think that what they're not recognizing is the more pressure that they put on private housing. Something's got to give. Either find a way to make the housing affordable for us so that we can pay to give it to you for, next to nothing. do something about that. Maybe let's get the money laundering out of our, housing system and get our prices into a place that might not be so insane, or let us do what we need to do in order to be able to at least cover what we need to cover and recognize that this is a much bigger issue that you're not going to fix by adding more red tape, because all we're going to do is say, you know what, we're done. You need 10 houses. Well, we're removing 20 because we can't do it.
It's almost like the program that they created with, hey, we'll give you some incentives, we'll give you some grants, we'll give you some maybe land, you just have to create affordable housing for 20 years. Those contracts have came and gone, and now it's a time for when they have to renew, or that investor gets to walk away scot-free. They're still offering that program. Meanwhile, we're still 20 years later dealing with the same crisis that we have, but they're not listening to the people with boots on the ground. They want to look at just developers or people from a social agency trying to create these band-aid solutions. Like, this is a band-aid solution on a bullet wound. So we want to make sure that we have a deep understanding of how this housing crisis is, what are homeless populations, and taxpayers need to be concerned about this, because we're paying for the government housing, we're paying for the cleanup, these encampments, these tent encampments, and we're paying for these band-aid solutions like sleeping pods that they've introduced in Waterloo, where there's a bed, a refrigerator, and a table with a chair. And then they have to go into this main place for their showers, for their bathrooms. Like, it's next to a city dump, and it's also across the street from a paramedic, but they don't want to. Yes, it's better than an encampment, but is this going to be it's supposed to be transitional, but what is the definition of transitional when you don't have a long-term goal for permanent housing? That's where we have a problem with these type of projects.
I agree.
Now, Lena, before people want to listen to you, because geez, like you're speaking too much common sense. Give us a background. Give us your background of, because they don't know where I found you.
Well, okay. So my husband and I bought our first triplex in June of 2004. So we're approaching 20 years as landlords, housing providers. And we've, this is what we do. So we have that. But I also run a full service property management company, right? So I deal with property management on behalf of other investors. So I get to deal with the headaches and the challenges and everything else that comes from an investor who doesn't have the time or the desire to go in and deal with the day-to-day, because I think you can agree with me that it is a very, it's an acquired taste. It's not meant for everybody. Tenant management, tenant relationships are not relationships that are very easy all the time. And sometimes when you have that emotional attachment, or that tenant knows you have that emotional attachment, it becomes very challenging. So I get to do everything I need to do and not worry about the fact that, you're going to show up at my house and scream at me and yell at me because you think that I'm a multimillionaire and, I own this house, therefore you owe me. So that is kind of in a nutshell from an investment perspective what it is that we do. So my husband and I buy multifamily. We started with triplexes and, fourplexes. And obviously we grew in my world. The bigger the scale, the better the numbers. And the more stable it is, the more control you have. So that's kind of what we do. We find really gross multifamilies, we stabilize them, we put in management systems and processes, and we have great tenants, right? But I can tell you, in the last 3 years, the entire platform of tenancy has shifted. The people who are moving, the people who are looking for housing, the people who are currently needing to be housed are not the people that were out there 5 years ago, 4 years ago. And good tenants aren't leaving.
Nope.
They are staying put, and they're okay to be in an older unit. They're okay to be in an older space, to have that stability, because our affordability has gone so high that leaving now is almost impossible. And I did showings in Brantford. What day is today? Friday? Wednesday, I think it was. Cute little townhouse in Brantford, nothing super fancy, but it's been cleaned up, it's been renovated. And, in the interest of time, because I don't have a lot of it, I book showings in a 30-minute increment. Now that COVID's done and I'm allowed to just, pile people because generally, whatever, everybody show up 7:30. From 7:30 to 8 o'clock. You show up, you come in, no big deal. And normally 50 to 60% don't show up. So yesterday, everybody showed up. So at one point I had like 37 people going through this townhouse and they all know each other. It's like, oh, hey, Brenda, hey, Sherry. I was like, what is happening? And this is really what it is. And they all have kind of similar stories. Oh, well, my landlord's selling his house. We need to find a new place to live. Oh, the landlord's tearing down the building. We need to find a new place to live. Oh, my landlord's, mother needs to move in. We need a new place to live. Oh, my landlord just had a baby. They need their basement. We need a new place to live. Right? So it's like they don't want to go. They've been there for a really long time and now they're paying $600-700 more. So I get rental applications and it's like 5 adults all applying.
Yeah.
And groups now of friends who are moving in together to be able to afford the costs, because that one space they used to have, they now need these 2 families to pay the new rents.
Mm-hmm.
So I get it. It's hard. It's challenging, but like,
no, Lena, you're
on that mortgage. So what are you going to do?
You're on to something there, because there was a recent article that had came out with my mayor, Jan Liggett, who was commenting of slum landlords stacking people into rental units like sardines. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like I can get like people renting out rooms. I can see that, in Toronto, you see people like, hey, there's 3 beds in a room, like they're all individually rented. But in reality, we have tenants who want to live like that because of the cost of inflation. The cost of living has gotten so high that that's what they choose to do to keep 100%. The cost low there. But a landlord, we have no control. We can't say like, you just moved in X amount of people. You only signed in with 2 people on the lease. We need you now to vacate, some of those people. But we can only do that underneath the N5 if it's an overcrowding situation. Yeah. And you have to determine what is considered overcrowding within your municipality for us to even have some type of control within it. So I'm glad that you brought that part up, because I was like, itching.
For investors, Niagara Falls has a maximum of 2 persons per bedroom zoning capacity, which means that if you have 2 bedrooms, no more than 4 persons can be in that, because you can only have 2 persons per bedroom.
And then you got to be careful doing your inspections, because sometimes tenants are turning the living room into a bedroom. And this could be a little, talk to your insurance company, because that could be considered rooming. And they don't like that, insurance companies. So
insurance is actually getting really tough now too. Like we are going on renewals in Hamilton. Let's say this is a property 8 years, 9 years owned. And now insurance is coming due and they're saying, oh, well, we're not going to provide you with water coverage because you sit in an area that has a high water table. So that means you're prone to flooding and backups, and we're not going to offer you this. And I'm thinking, it's been almost a decade. There has never been an issue. There has never been a claim. What is the problem today?
Yeah.
And everybody on every level is trying to find a way to pinch and to profit. And yet we're stuck with
2.5.
We're lucky. We have high inflation. That's why we got 2.5. What year was it that we got 0.9?
What about the one that didn't have a point? And we'd had no rent increases. And that's what our elected officials had now proudly said, hey, we're capped at 2.5. We also had an eviction ban in place. We also did not allow landlords to increase their rent throughout the pandemic. This is what we're doing for renters. And it's like, no. What you've done is now looked at different ways that landlords need to pivot for what is being passed to us. Now, one, we are potentially looking at, the renovation side of demolishing the property in order to get more units to make it profitable. Or 2, they're getting out of the business entirely, selling the property to an owner occupier and reinvesting that money into other countries, Belize, Costa Rica, Texas, Florida, Thailand, Portugal. Like the amount of people that I talk to is crazy. And that's where they're not calculating what units they're losing, but their goal is to gain 1.5 million units in 2031. But with this Bill 97, guys, it's going to do the opposite of what this government is intending to do. Now, when they talk about they're going to have feedback. So make sure you're getting your feedback on to create a balanced framework around municipal rental replacement bylaws. So in here, they talk about where you're demolishing a rental unit and they still want you to offer a unit back to the tenant at the same rate. And their question that they have with that in particular feedback, what they're looking for an example. I'm not going to read all of them to you guys because I know you probably have something else better to do on a Friday night than getting depressed with us. Should rent for replacement units be regulated? If so, how? Then they have, are there any types of entities or institutions that own or operate residential properties of 6 or more units that should be exempted from rental replacement rules? If so, what are they and what would be exempted? And number C, it was, are there any other elements the government should consider? So the government creates this entire, like, we're going to fix housing and protection for tenants. And then they reach out to the public and say, we want your feedback on this now. It's like, well, shouldn't you ask us this before you create, this type of policy where you're now discouraging people from wanting to demolish their property to take out 3 units and build more units to get you to that goal of 1.5 million homes? What kind of incentives are you creating to entice the private sector? Because we know the government ain't doing it.
Yeah. And this could go so wrong in so many ways. Like, I think about, okay, let's look at this from like a cost analysis perspective. And if I have a unit that currently rents for, let's pretend just for the sake of being funny, it rents for $10 a square foot, and market rent would be, $45 a square foot. And my tenant has, 100 square feet. So they're paying $1,000 a month. Well, what's going to stop me, the housing provider, who are you now are mandating to allow this individual back, from creating 300 square foot units so that I'm still giving it to them at market rent? Like, are you going to force me now to build giant units? Because I think every single person who has been on this planet for 20 years or more knows that the size of apartments and condos has gone from here to here to here to here.
Yep.
So is the government going to come in and say, yes, not only do you have to come in and provide housing back at the rate that they're at, but it has to be, within whatever? Or do I now have the option to build 4 units in the 1,000 square foot space that I had and rent them all out for $500 a month?
Yeah. It's like it's infringing on your property rights in itself, what they're trying to implement, but it's also going to just discourage anyone from wanting to invest in this province. Like, if you thought everyone was discouraged because of the RTA and the LTB, now they're just magnifying the problem and going, hey, like, we don't want you to be building. Like, who is going to be building these typical units if this is the type of structure that we're supposed to be abiding by, and it's giving the municipalities powers?
And I mean, hey, I demolished my unit and now it's brand new. So now it will have been occupied for residential purposes for the very first time post November 2018. So
yeah,
just saying.
Something new. No rent control.
Just saying. So, hey, rent's $500 today. And then, so they're going to create a very unstable market. People are going to get displaced because there will be, I joke with my husband all the time and I'm like, every rule has a loophole. That's why we have lawyers. Their profession is to find that loophole. Like, every single rule created is a loophole. And then that's basically what's going to end up happening is when you overregulate, housing providers become loophole finders. And it's when those loopholes are trying to be found that people get displaced and we have problems. So why don't we find a comprehensive, logical, commonsensical solution that works for everybody. And, everybody gives a little bit. Tenants are going to be a little bit upset and landlords are going to be a little bit upset, but at least it's fair on both sides.
The problem is that they're not bringing the right people to the table for the conversations. Our ask is for the government to create a proper task force that, involves the property managers, the landlords, the tenants, like down to earth, in the trenches, boots on the ground people that can say, this is what you're going to do. This is the other avenue where, when we're trying to kick anybody out for renovations, what that looks like at the landlord and tenant board, what's the length of time? Because even through this report that came from Steve Clark, where actually in these papers, where they want to create a common payment agreement form. I'm like, dude, it exists. Do you need me to send it to you? Like, I can send it to you, but this is just like how detailed do we need to be with, you don't know what you're doing and you're listening to the wrong people. So they end up having this other section is seeking feedback on the proposed changes to help protect tenants from bad faith renovictions. So this is where they're going to create this person, we don't know who it is right now, and they want them to come into our rental units to deem that, yes, the tenant does need to vacate for us to do the renovations. And the feedback that they're looking for is what feedback, if any, on the proposed. So what our thought process, I'm going to assume, on what this bad faith renoviction looks like. What type of qualification should an individual who provides these report be required to have? I'm telling you, it's real. Like, check the links, guys. And what information should reports be required to include?
I feel like anybody who has renovated a house that was like more than 50 years old is sitting right now and just laughing at all of the things that they found inside of their walls that the home inspector said, I can't see inside the walls, so I can't guarantee that what I'm seeing from the outside is reflected on the inside. Because I can tell you, I have found orange extension cord in my ceilings connecting the extension of a house to the wiring of the main house that then was going to the panel.
Yeah. They're going to...
I don't think that was safe.
Are they taking samples? Are they drilling holes in the wall, seeing what the electrical looks like, the plumbing looks like? Are they going to be... And this is where...
And what happens? What happens if the person who comes out there has decided, based on the limited bit of information that they can get, that everything's fine, and then it's not? Like, is the government going to put aside a fund to help pay for restitution for these tenants who got to stay in their homes while these renovations that we don't know the extent of were happening, and then they got sick?
Well, the N13 states it's going to be extensive renovations, it's demolishing it, or it's repurposing it outside of residential. And you need permits. So the permit, in order to get a permit, you're going through the city route, which they're going to be qualified. The contractors that are being used are going to be qualified, and landlords are going to be qualified. Because you know what? Who's the only person that's going to be able to tell that the tenants need to vacate is when we're ripping up floors. You want us to have to keep serving our tenant 24 hours notice to come in and do these repairs and work around their belongings and worry about damaging their belongings, the safety of our tools lying around as they're in the unit, or the concept that we've damaged their belongings at the same time. Like, and then get this. So Hamilton had just had a news article or video talking about the renovictions in Hamilton, and there was 103 applications brought to the board. And we're like, well, is that for demo? Is that for extensive renovations? And understanding we have aging properties. That's including our HVAC systems, it's our plumbing, it's our electrical, it's flooring, it's kitchens. Like, my husband doesn't even want to do our kitchen while I'm living in here. He's like, I'll do the kitchen when you and the kids take off for a week.
God.
Right? Like,
we had a brand new house that the very, very intelligent individuals who built it, somebody decided to actually cut through the supporting joists in order to run the HVAC. So the back of our house started to sink, and they had to come in and put in steel posts and kind of re-stabilize everything. And they kept us in our house doing that. And I was so mad that every time I came into my house, I was dragging drywall dust everywhere that I was going. My husband has severe allergies. His allergies were like non-stop. And it got to a point where we were like, you know what? Forget it. We can't even deal with this. You need my house for 2 weeks. Go ahead and do it. But you need to put us up somewhere, or you need to do something, because we can't live like this. So now imagine a unit that has had a tenant in there, let's say for 10, 15, 20 years, because nobody's going in and renovicting a unit that's been occupied for 3 or 4 years.
With $700 rent.
Right? Like nobody's doing that. Nobody is going in there and saying, oh, you know what? I really feel like navy blue cabinets and a teal island is so in style right now. So I think that it's time for you to go, because I believe that maybe one of these more, fashion forward millennials might pay me $300 or $400 more a month. Like nobody's doing that.
Yeah, well, let's give you an upgrade, because the money is totally coming in for us to do it, because we work for free and everything should be free for you. Like let's kind of do it. But when they look at that, and you're trying to give tenants notice, one, for renovate, like you have 120 days. Now they want to put in another requirement, because you got to get your permits. You're going to have to show that information of what your extent of the renovations is going to be. Now they want this person to come in, which we don't know what the wait time would be for someone to inspect your unit, to give you the blessing, to bring that piece of paper to the landlord and tenant board, and then have to wait between 7 to 12 months to get the order from the board, or to have the hearing. Then you have to wait a month or two for the order, and then you have to take that order to the sheriff. Like these people have a time frame of 2031. By the time I get the tenant out, it might be 2031.
It all depends, Kayla. It all depends. But they were asking for qualifications. One of the qualifications, you should write this for them, is whomever it is that's going in there to determine whether or not this unit can be occupied has to have converted a minimum of 5 rental units in their lifetime.
Yeah.
Like at a minimum, you have to have opened a door, found a surprise to be able to come in there and look at a 30-year-old kitchen and be like, oh, no, it's all good. We're not going to find any asbestos behind there. No, don't worry about it. The wall's a little soft. It's okay.
Is your wall warm? Oh, don't worry. It's another source of heat. No electrical worries there. You guys can live through that.
I know there's a window on the outside of the building, and I can't seem to find it on the inside of the building, but I'm sure it's okay.
And they have to understand, they put the punishments in play. They up the fines, whatever. We're okay with that, for the simple fact that, yes, we shouldn't be abusing this typical way of renovating the unit and getting the tenants out. You still have to offer it back to them. Tenants have up to 2 years to go back to the landlord and tenant board to bring their landlord if they been caught doing a bad faith eviction. So you put the groundwork in there to protect the tenant, but don't limit what the landlords need to do, not only to renovate the unit for the safety of the tenant, but what we need to do as investors to bring that unit to the property to its full potential. So when we need to do a refinance, to pull that money back out, to be able to reinvest that money to continue to keep providing units to this market, because small landlords, we're providing 70% of the housing stock. So,
or idea, we go down the same social thinking and say, okay, governing body, I hear you and I want to work with you. So how about this? For every renovation that you provide me a 100% forgivable loan for, I will allow my tenant to return at the rent that they were paying.
They don't.
I'll keep the rent the same if I was cash flowing before and now it's not coming out of my pocket. I'm okay with that.
Well, they issued $202 million to the homelessness prevention, programs. There's lots of money to be floating around, but you need to keep it up. But get this, the mayor of Hamilton said, we have to question why we're getting tenants evicted when the extent of the repairs are so extensive that they need to leave. And I think they're going on the concept of doing inspections to make sure that the landlords are upkeeping their rental units so it doesn't get to that despair in order for them to do these type of renovations. And I'm like, Did she just say that? Like, yes, she
Yes,
did.
she did.
She,
So
she,
Hamilton's tricky too, right? I think Hamilton's getting a lot of, I don't know how to put it without putting it in like a really bad way, and I don't want to like offend people per se, but like, so during COVID, right? So I got a large portfolio out in Hamilton, right? So we started out there back in 2012. Things were pretty stable. Things were going up, but it was stable. And then when COVID hit, rents went insane. Insane. And I'm sure that people who have been in the market for a while can say the same thing. Like, there were basement apartments that I was renting in 2018 for $1,500 that in the middle of COVID were being rented with virtual tours for almost $2,000 a month.
mm-hmm.
Right. And these increases have gone up. So I think what's also happening is there's a lot of misinformation. I think a lot of people who are going out and they're putting this information out, they're saying, oh, they're rent evicting because they want to jack up rents. It's not that reason. It's because the market's been so hot and property has changed hands, and prior landlords were so negligent. And now you've got decent human beings coming in who want to provide safe housing that's not going to cause asthma and lung disease or any other kind of issues to long-term residents. But to do it, it requires a substantial amount to be invested. So I think if this was happening 10 years ago, where rents were maybe $200, $300, $400 year over year, nobody would say anything. They'd be like, oh yeah, we have so many slumlords, and how come nobody, all these outside investors, we had this a lot in Cornwall, all these outside investors coming into our city and they're buying up our property and they're just letting them fall apart, right?
And if you look at the way that, the way that they're trying to implement these rules and prevent us from doing the renovations and trying to do it with the tenant in there. Now, you and I both know is that tenants are able to apply to the board for rent rebatements based on the concept that they weren't able to use their unit for the full capabilities. And now they want money back on their rent.
Oh,
right?
absolutely not. You, Mr. Governing Body, said that they could stay there. You said they could stay there. They shouldn't get a rent rebate. Like, you said it was fine. No.
Well,
No.
And that's where we get into very hairy situations. We're going to have a lot of conflict now between landlords and the tenants. And again, we're going to be putting more pressure on the landlord and tenant board, which is already a broken system. So we have to really be careful on how they're doing it. Now, this goes into the next one of landlord's own personal use. So the eviction for personal use. Now, since the eviction ban, a lot of landlords, knowing the 2.5% increase, the backlog at the landlord and tenant board, people are like, you know what, I'm done, right? And they want to take it over for their own personal use, for themselves, for their family members, or they're selling it and the new owner wants to move into the premises. Now they want to put a stipulation on a time frame, because it used to be a reasonable time frame. Now they actually want to put that time frame in this act in order to get the landlords into the property. So if they don't move in by that time frame, where the tenants can keep an eye on, because if the landlord doesn't move in, now you're leaving the landlord open to being fined that $100,000 for an individual and up to $500,000 for a corporation. So it's almost like a little trap, right? Now, in the question says, what would be a reasonable time frame that the landlord move in after the tenant has vacated the unit, and why? Well, first and foremost is that you shouldn't be telling us a time frame when we can take possession of getting into the unit, because a lot of things could impact that. And that's why the second question was, what circumstances might prevent a landlord from reasonably meeting the prescribed time frame? Well, I don't know, probably that you just took 12 months to evict the tenant, to find out that there's feces in the wall, the floors need to be done, there's drywall that's been punched, kitchen cabinets destroyed. Like, renovations don't take, just a few weeks. They could take months, they could take a year. And now you're going to tell us a certain time frame that we're not even too sure that we can meet ourselves, depending on which way the rental has obviously went in there. And something could happen to the landlord's living situation, where it could be a health situation which prevents them from moving in. So what happens when you don't meet that time frame? are we being charged that $100,000, the $500,000 fine? This is where I feel like our property rights have been taken away. And this is why we need to speak up.
So I think that's one of those really big it depends situations, right? Like, fine, you want to give us a time frame. I understand. You know what I mean? I get it from the viewpoint of the people who are trying to make these rules. Again, we have a small sliver of people who are generally not even residing within our province, who have investments and who will come back for a little while and sit up in a hotel or in a condo or an Airbnb because they can afford to. And it's just the right time to sell their units and they want to use that. Fine, I get it. And then there's the vast majority who legitimately want to take back their units. And I get it, right? I get that you want to be able to say, you know what, you said you're selling the property, and you said the closing was on this date, and the seller is, the buyer is coming in. So the buyer should be moving in within, let's say, 60 days of closing. Like, you bought the house for that purpose. Fine. But there has to be a fair and timely review. So if a tenant wants to file a complaint because somebody didn't move in 60 days, because that's what they've decided is reasonable, well, okay, let's get in front of somebody within 3 weeks and have that discussion. Because if I can show, let's say there was a situation where I came in and now there's substantial amounts of damage, and I can show that the unit is now not inhibitable because it's being renovated, like, what are you going to do? You're going to fine me for what?
Well, and that's the thing. Now we got to go to the board. The board has already taken a long time to deal with any type of disputes. And the board is too backlogged on just non-payment of rent applications that maybe a situation like this that would grant or warrant a fast expedited hearing to deal with the matter in order to explain our situation of why we weren't able to move in. But then you have the other hand where I know of a landlord, she's been on this channel, where it was over 35,000, well, actually 50,000. The board only dealt with 35. And it took her 3 years to take possession of this unit. And when she finally got it granted, they still extended it another 3 months because the tenant had children in the school and didn't want to move. So they extended it another 3 months before they would give an order to evict the type of tenant. So it's like that you have to claw back. And that's why you'll have the vacancy tax. This is why people would rather leave their unit empty with knowing that there's a possibility that they will need to move back into it. And this is where it gets all hairy.
So that N4 is the fundamental problem that nobody wants to actually solve.
Yeah.
If we were to create a law, let's create bill number, whatever, 597, and say, we are going to propose that non-payment of rent, you get an N4 issued with a mandatory payment plan that needs to be completed by the tenant within the period prior to the termination. So I have to give you 19 days. Within that 19 days, my lovely tenant who has fallen on hard times, because I know you are honest and I know you are trying, we're going to turn around and you are going to give me this form prior to the termination date on your notice. And we are going to take that, if you haven't paid your rent, and we are going to file it with the L1 immediately. That is what you need to do, because if we have, let's say, let's pretend every day that, an adjudicator is sitting, they're listening to, let's say, 5 N13s and N12s, and they're listening to 15 N4s. Imagine if we got rid of those 15 because there was a mandatory form that had to be signed. There has to be a mandatory repayment plan that has to be met, and we bypass.
No, instead they wait 12 months and then work out a payment plan for the tenant to do it. But the government has already issued.
Let's worry about 100, N13, L2 situations, because that's going to solve our problem.
And that's the point where we know that tenants are struggling. But if they just issued the $202 million to the homeless and prevention program, which is like local service managers to help tenants with rent relief, with first and last month's rent. There's obviously other programs like the portable housing benefit that helps tenants with $350 extra to help them with their rent. Why are we still having a full hearing for non-payment of rent when we can keep people in their homes? It's cheaper to keep people in their homes than to have them on the street and to have them in the system, which is very burdensome on the taxpayers. So we have to get ourselves into getting our elected officials to talk about that, providing the evidence, providing this payment plan, and trying to get our tenants back on their feet, because there is that portion of tenants who are just abusing it. They're at 30,000. I just got a call yesterday, $30,000 in the arrears. He's been waiting 11 months before he even got a hearing to deal with the matter, not including the delay for his order. And here there's another tenant who filed in December, and their court date is now in June 20th. But now the tenant paid up and they're ready to go. And so it's like, so someone who's 3 months behind got a hearing date, and someone who's 30,000 in arrears still don't have a hearing date. And now the Ontario Ombudsman is coming out with a report soon. And I think this is why this bill and the other conversations are happening in the elected officials now, because they know this is coming. And again, it does not address the concept of how broken the system is at the board, and it does not encourage more supply. It doesn't. They have to work a better plan in place, and they're not doing it with the current people. I would like to petition that we get Steve Clark out of here. Like, that guy got to go. Like, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. We worked with like multiple different associates, members to Steve Clark. They keep being changed out like crazy. Like, how are we supposed to come together and create these solutions when you can't even keep someone in a position long enough to understand the issue and work on a solution to work with it? Now we got the concept of air conditioning. So they just took over our rights, and they wanted to go ahead and tell the tenants that you are allowed to put an air conditioner in your unit. You can give your landlord written notice that you're going to be doing it, providing them with the information regarding that equipment, and making sure that you provide it, you're doing it safely. We want to make sure you installed it safely. I don't know if they created a job for someone to come by and check these air conditioners.
No, they have installers. Come on now, Kayla.
Oh, I guess we got to do that.
Installation.
And when it falls off the window, we're liable. When it damages the wall and puts water through the units, we're going to be at fault, and we're going to have to do the renovations. Or the tenants are now getting an N5 to address to fix that the damage they've caused. And now we're bringing them to the board because of the damage that they've done, or the damage to the window. You and I both know how much windows cost. They cost so much that they didn't even want to put them in the shipping containers in Waterloo. So they know how much these windows are. So again, I get the concept that we need to, work on allowing them, but you got to go into, we want the floor models, something that's not going to cause that type of damage. We can't be having, like, you had to be very detailed in no window shakers that are coming in there that are gas guzzlers. And guess what, landlords, if the tenants do it, you get to raise the rent while that equipment is going to be inside. But what is that rate? Based on our utilities increasing, and the tenant using that equipment 24/7 for the entire months. How are we going to keep this fair so both landlords and tenants? So, but their question for the air conditioning, I never read that one yet. The tenant gives written notice to the landlord to the intent to install and provide landlord with the information about the efficiency of the air conditioner and the tenant's anticipated usage. I'll just have it on for an hour a day. The tenant must ensure the air conditioner are installed safely and securely, not cause damage to the rental unit or complex. Okay, thank you for number 2. The installation must comply with applicable laws, including municipal bylaws and any rules which be prescribed by the RTA. Great job. I'm looking forward to reading the potential submissions from people regarding their feedback on telling us that we have no control on what our tenants are doing to our property. So please make sure that you let your elected officials know that this could backfire on the tenant and resulting in an eviction because you allowed them to put a window shaker that's going to cause some damage or even death, right? We've already got to learn about that in Toronto. What do you think about that, Lena?
It's horrible. Oh, so air conditioning. Oh, good Lord. I don't even know where to begin with this. I really don't know where to begin with. I don't even know where to start because
it's making a difference. It's providing affordable housing. Remember air conditioning.
So fine. Provide me with a grant to retrofit my property to supply these tenants with air conditioning. For the love of God, like, let's solve the problem at its root. The reason a tenant needs a goddamn air conditioner is because the building is probably old and not equipped. So government, why don't we find solutions to provide grants to housing providers where they can provide these conveniences safely to their tenants and do it without, like, it has to be viable, right? So I'm happy to put in air conditioning if it's not going to cost me $100,000 to retrofit my HVAC system. But I'm also willing to do that if you're going to provide me with a grant because I'm doing it. And now I'm providing because maybe I have seniors, maybe I have people with health issues and things like that. So I am now providing a need and a solution for a need to house, let's say, marginalized individuals for whatever reason that might be. Like, what the hell? Like, can we spend some money there instead of paying people to write this paper?
No, they're not paying people to write this paper. They now want us to help them. They come up with the titles. Now we got to do the work for them. And let's not remember the type of equipment that they're putting into this. And if it's tripping the breaker or blowing fuses,
it's not safe. Portable units, I understand, right? So the newer ones that are portable, they're better thought out. But if you look at the people who are living in units that really don't have access to the ACs and things like that, they're generally much older units. The people
and it probably needs to be demolished and renovated.
Probably. And then you would have an HVAC system that probably has air conditioning available to their big cycle never ends.
Sorry, we don't mean to laugh on the government. I've been very political and very trying to work with you, trying to be very politically correct. Now I'm going rogue. I'm just like, this is ridiculous.
Units in the windows are not safe. Sticking something inside a window is not safe. I think there are many government elected officials in the city of Toronto that would be happy to sit here and talk about the dangers that come. So let's solve problems with, the solution to a problem is only ever a solution if the problem ceases to exist, right? Like, you don't fix a problem. Fixing the problem means it doesn't exist anymore, because if it comes back, you didn't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't fix it and then it comes back. It was never fixed. So
they're trying to fix a problem with the same people, the same mindset who caused the problem.
So if we had mandatory payment plans, immediate, like N4 on the 2nd, right, everybody? N4 on the 2nd. And you have until the 19th to pay or get out. And in that period of time, if you're not going to pay me by the 19th and you don't want to leave, you're going to send me a payment plan. We're going to register it with a board to bypass the need for a hearing. And I'm going to hold you to that payment agreement.
And in
if
the
we
meantime,
got rid of this, we would have money that we don't have to pay to hire new adjudicators and everybody else, because we're not overwhelmed. And then maybe the government can look at housing grants and retrofit grants and all of these things for units that they want to keep in the market, or they want to provide newer units to. And individuals who are housing providers are now able to viably run a business and still provide semi-affordable solutions to tenants that are safe for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And
Fix
even
the problem.
even for the time frame that we're talking, like this payment plan, this gives enough time for that person to walk in. It's walk-in basis to these local service managers, explain their situation, show them the N4 application, call the landlord and be like, I just want to make sure that this is your information, this is how much the tenant
100%.
owes. And the one question that they need to ask when they're giving out money through these programs is there any other eviction application against you? You know, they're issuing out thousands of dollars to keep people in their homes, but the tenant
100%.
also has an N5 for their behavior to get evicted, and because they're ruining the enjoyment of others, you know, so that we're kind of wasting money that way. Sometimes it's about, let's give you a fresh start, let's go somewhere else,
100%.
let's get the money there, right? There is these out of box, and we know it's the N4s, and we even know for an L2, so the non for personal use applications, it should not grant a full hearing. If the landlord signs that affidavit, if they provide the evidence that they are living in it, if they are fully aware that this is now the punishment of $100,000 if you're caught, informing them that the tenants do have up to 2 years to go after their landlord, and you provide the tenant with that in particular application form to give them so they have the knowledge that they need to file at the landlord and tenant board. It's about providing that education. But instead, they want to do these little changes that is causing more damage. I'm like, okay, so before we go into other topics here, we'll get the last one that they have with proposed amendments to require a standard form for rent repayment agreement, and the landlord and tenant board LTB makes an order underneath section 206 of the Residential and Tenancy Act. So the question that they have there is that, I got double-sided here. So they said a repayment agreement under 206 is used when a landlord has applied to the LTB to evict a tenant for a rent arrears, and the landlord and tenant agree to a repayment without immediate resorting to an eviction. If the parties reach such agreement, the agreement is given effect by an LTB order setting out the terms of the payment. Bill 184, Protecting Tenants and Strengthening Community Housing Act, don't get me started on that, passed in 2020, made changes to the Residential and Tenancy Act 2006 to encourage landlords to enter into a rental repayment agreement that maintain tenancies as opposed to pursue eviction for non-payment of rent. The change allowed landlords, if a repayment agreement is breached, to seek ex parte eviction orders from the LTB, as well as when the hearing of an eviction application, the LTB must consider if the landlord attempted to enter into a repayment agreement with their tenant before issuing an eviction order for rent arrears. Currently, there's no requirement that the repayment agreement be in a certain form/format. The proposal is that the government is proposing to amend the RTA to make the use of a form approved by the LTB mandatory for repayment agreements made under the 206 of the Act. The LTB has developed and already made publicly available on its website repayment agreement form, which is developed in consultation with the tenant advocacy organizations, not us. It uses the current, not mandatory. This form provides a plain language explanation of what happens when the agreement is breached and additional information about related rental rules and the tenant's rights, including that the tenant may wish to seek legal advice prior to signing and that the eviction order is made without a hearing. The tenant can submit a motion to set aside the order and request a hearing. What? Like, so we thought this was in because of the pandemic, right? We thought that they did this because of the pandemic, making it look like you're working with your tenant. So always sending that message to your tenant saying, hey, you know, I want to work out a payment agreement with you. If they get back to you, great. If they don't, screenshot that, provide that you try to work with the tenant. But when you go to the landlord and tenant board now to say, I've tried to work a payment plan with my tenant, they refuse to work out a payment plan. And then the board comes out and issues a payment plan at the hearing in order to okay, tenant, you need to continue to pay your rent on the first of the month. And also, what can you afford to pay for the rent arrears? And I've seen adjudicators putting their normal rent plus an additional $100 on top of that to pay for the rent arrears when the rent arrears was well over $6,000.
Yeah.
So having this payment plan in place, yes, they'll have a breach, but if are they trying to work this where if I have this payment agreement plan and the tenants don't sign it before we go to the board, what is the point of this in particular form when the process has already been in play? And again, why am I the credit card? Why am I the loan to the tenants?
You're not a credit card. You can't charge 27% interest on late payments.
Right.
You're not the credit card. What credit card?
And if I go into a grocery store and I can go in and steal a bunch of food because food is like, it's a necessity. It's a human right. We need food. You're going to be charged with theft. You can go and pump $100 worth of gas and drive off and you're being charged with theft.
Oh, they'll show up at your door.
But you can go ahead and you can steal $30,000, $50,000 of someone's business because it's their business. You're stealing from their business. And you're telling me I got to work out a payment plan with this person when they haven't paid a single dollar in over 11 months.
Honestly, the non-payment is the one issue that they need to address and they don't. Like, I'm sorry, Mr. Governing Body or Mrs. Government Body and whoever it is that's making these suggestions, but if a tenant falls behind because they hit hard times, 20 years of experience tells me that tenant will at a minimum make partial payments while they are trying to catch up. They do. And if a landlord has the ability to work with those partial payments, they do. Like, we're not crazy people as landlords. And as a general whole, the majority of tenants are good people. So if I sign a payment plan, which in my opinion should be absolutely mandatory, like you got an N4 and you have to come up with a solution as to how you're going to pay your rent. Mm-hmm. Because quite frankly, if you cannot afford your rent, you need to be adulting and you need to find accommodations that will allow you to pay your obligations. And if we were doing these things, then landlords wouldn't lose $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $100,000 and wouldn't have to make it up the next time around. So if I show up at a hearing and my tenant hasn't paid a penny in 11 months, the fact that an adjudicator can think that it's even remotely okay to say, oh, you poor thing, I know you're going through hard times. I know you haven't bothered to even pay a cent, but let's give you 5 years to see if you can catch up. Why? Why is that okay? If you've made an attempt, you are a decent person and you've tried and you've hit hard times. Okay, fine. Yep. Fine. I can come in there and say, you know what? I've gotten 14 payments of $1,000. Rent is $1,900. We're $900 behind, but they're trying. Fine. You want us to work it out? Let's work it out. But you haven't paid me a penny in a year? Mm-hmm. Get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here. Not only get the hell out of here, but you shouldn't be allowed to rent elsewhere. Like, go into government subsidized housing. Go give the units to these people. You want to provide free housing? Go for it, man.
We all look for when these orders have been dished out by the landlord and tenant board, and we're trying to screen our tenants by looking at previous judgments that have been posted publicly. Now, not all of them are being posted, and they're not being posted quickly. So it's highly encouraged for every landlord property management out there to report that monthly payment history to Front Lobby. Getting that data to Landlord Credit Bureau and Equifax monthly is very crucial when it comes down to our tenant screening, because the only way to prevent yourself from having this is to making sure that the tenant screening process that you've implemented is going to work. And knowing and educating our tenants now, like you may not be charged criminally for this, even though we think you should, based on knowing that you've done this to multiple landlords and you haven't paid a single dollar. Yes, it should be criminal charges laid against you, but we have to now work with that broken system and making sure everyone's reporting that data to Front Lobby so that we can work, communicate with each other and see, we've done our credit check, we see the trade line, we see the debt, we're not going to be accepting this type of tenant, and letting the tenant know there's consequences now for you to be abusing the landlords, because what you're doing is impacting our housing stock. You're impacting our abilities to provide housing, to continue to keep providing housing. If we have someone that we lost $50,000, now that $50,000 would be really good for us to take and be able to reinvest it into more rental units. But you're not taking it seriously. The government's not taking it seriously of the people who are fraudulently abusing this broken system.
But imagine how completely volatile this entire cycle will be. So maybe it's time for the individuals who are making these recommendations to look at the cycle from beginning to end. I am a housing provider. I am an individual. I work my butt off to be able to pay my bills, to pay the rates that I have to pay the bank in order to be provided the privilege of owning my home one day, because we all know that if we've got that mortgage, you know, technically it's not really mine until the bank decides it is.
Yep.
So I have all of these responsibilities. And now let's just take a normal, we're not talking investors like myself or like you who, you know, we do this for a living. I'm talking somebody who they got relocated. I've got a ton of clients. They get relocated for work. You know, they have their family home. They know at some point they're going to come home. And if they sell their home, they're going to get priced out of the market. So they keep it and they want to rent it. So now this client has a home and they go elsewhere and they're paying rent or they have another home. My tenant doesn't pay. And it takes 12 months for me to be able to collect. And now my bills go into default. My bills are getting paid late. My bills are all falling behind. And it gets to a point where, unfortunately, there are a lot of housing providers in Ontario hitting this point right now where I'm going to be in a situation where I could potentially lose my home, which means I now have to come back and I have to enter this market as a tenant with garbage credits that no one's going to rent to.
Yep.
And I'm going to end up living in my car. I'm going to end up in one of those little pod thingies that you're talking about, or in a tent, because I decided that I wanted to try and provide housing to somebody else, and my government didn't take care of me. And that government is not going to take care of me when I'm sitting in a tent because nobody's going to rent to me because my credit's gone straight to shit. Because somebody decided they didn't want to pay their rent. And the government decided, it's okay, you don't have to pay for a year. There must have been a reason. They need to fix that problem. If they were to fix that problem, this system would start to move in a direction that even if they make these ridiculous rules, even if we give them everything that's in this bill, whatever it is that they're trying to pass, if they got rid of that backlog of non-payment, we'd still be able to do it in a timely fashion.
Even for the people that are, you know, speaking with the security guard when we were in person, when you get to see that they've got to see the same tenant at the board with different landlords, and you're not going to punish that. But know what? When the new changes came out, I think it was Bill 184, you now need to disclose if you have done an N12 or N13, how many you've done in the last 2 years. So you want to track the landlords, but you're not going to track each tenant going through landlord to landlord to landlord. So that way you can have a very different approach to dealing with professional tenants. And the adjudicator has a full picture to say, hey, tenant, like, I'm looking through your files here because you have your file and we get to see that you've been at the board these many times with different addresses. You now need to have consequences. There's lots of consequences for the landlords. There's nothing for the tenants. No. And until they put something in place for the tenants who are abusing it, the good tenants are going to suffer. The bad,
give a subsidized housing exemption, right? If government housing doesn't have to abide by the landlord and tenant rules, if you want us to subsidize the housing, we should also be exempt from these rules. And if my tenant lied on their application and lied about their income, I get to kick them out and I get to jack up their rent and I get to do all of these things that they've given themselves the privilege of doing.
Market rent units. There's lots of inefficiencies within.
I'm okay with that too.
And we see that We see that in Toronto, when they get money passed down to them, they're excited for renovations, not to create new ones, just for the renovations. It's time for the government to get out of the housing market because they're not doing good at it. They are literally causing the problem to be a lot worse. Instead, joint ventures with people who actually know what the hell they're doing so that we can provide those desperately needed units for over the 107,000 people coming to Ontario alone with only 15,000 purpose-built rentals created. The numbers are not making sense. The policies don't make sense.
Yeah.
They're bad policies that are just discouraging the landlords to be completely out of the rental market, completely out. And that's why they put the stipulations for vacancy tax to short-term rentals. They want to be able to evict landlords out of Ontario, and they're doing a good job at it. So we want to be able to still come on, still do our fights. We're talking with the MPPs, the ones that seem to look like they're listening, but some of them don't. And a lot of them are just a face. We all know that a lot of it comes down to staff, policies advisors that we need to get to. And we'll continue to keep doing that. But in the meantime, keep educating each other on tenant screening tips. Make sure you're doing your rent reporting on a monthly basis. Put it in your rental ad that you do it, and make sure that you're paying over $200 for a tax write-off, price that you could be utilizing.
Yeah.
You need to be, investing into your business. And that's a tool that could help you in such a positive way until we can get this broken system fixed.
Yeah.
So I encourage everyone, it's in the links below there. You can check out all these topics and what their questions are to you. Be sarcastic if you need to, because the landlord
just fix the non-payment, fix the bloody problem.
Yeah.
I get it. Everything else, maybe there's a situation that you have to discuss. There is nothing to discuss with non-payment of rent. You didn't pay the money you owe to live. Therefore, you are not provided with the luxury of living there.
The key though, there is government funds to help you.
Honest to God. And that's the other thing I think is very important.
Like
Like
it's
during COVID,
they want 12 months. Like they want 12 months of that person's bank statements to prove that they don't even have money, right? And instead, we have taxpayers' money being invested into these Band-Aid solutions as sleeping pods. We have the cleanup cost for our encampments. We have the taxpayers' money being used for our policing service, the violence that's happening in here. It's all connected into housing. And if the government can't do it right, then get out of the way for the people that know how to do it. Sell off your social housing to people who know what they're doing. Because if not, they got to start. Right now, there's a mayor candidate. I'm not going to say his name for now, but it's like, what can we do? And I'm like, I think it's too late, bud. I don't think anything out of municipal government can do to deal with this housing crisis that the province has gotten us into because it's been mismanaged for decades. Decades.
And that's also something that's important to know, because I think sometimes we forget that this is not a problem that happened because of COVID. This is not a problem that happened because, Doug Ford shut down the tribunals, or there was you're not allowed to evict and we couldn't collect rent and it didn't start with them.
No.
You know what I mean? It started a long time ago, and it's just been this little snowball that's been slowly going down a hill, and COVID just kind of took our little 30-degree angle and made it into like 70. And it's just so fast now. And I think that's something really important to note, because I think as individuals, when we go to speak to our elected officials and the people who are representing us, if we look at it from a viewpoint of, okay, you didn't create this problem. I get it. You are the messenger, and you're now going to sit here and listen to me. So if I go in with that understanding, how I'm going to communicate with them will be different. Yes. And if you're communicating with them differently, they will hear you differently. Mm-hmm. And if they hear you differently, it might actually make an impact. And I think that's important as well, right? Like the people who are currently in charge are not the people who created this problem.
No,
at all. No. And I don't think they understand just how bad the problem is, because I don't know right? How politics works. But I feel like if we have one group in charge today and a different group was in charge before, that group didn't come over and be like, hey, here's all of the things that we did. So here's my binder. Let's get caught up. And then hopefully you can move on, right? So there are people who are doing a job. There's a problem and they see it, but they have no idea how the problem was created.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't know where that first occurrence happened for them to fix it. So they're throwing spaghetti at a wall to see if it'll stick. You know what I mean? And they're hoping that it does. So let's not be mad at them. Okay, we can scratch our heads and we can make
We're
fun
being mad because they're not taking it and running with it, because it's almost like they're afraid, because they look at what the NDP are going to say. They look at what their tenant organizations are going to say, and they're going to be afraid to lose votes. But when you're spitting out another $6.5 million at the landlord and tenant board to deal with the majority of cases being non-payment of rent, wouldn't it be nice to take that 6.5 million and put it to the tenants to keep them in their homes and stop hiring adjudicators at $110,000 a piece? Damn, I've applied. You think they're ever going to put me as an adjudicator?
Of course
no.
I don't believe we're allowed to be adjudicators if we are housing providers. Like if we own rental housing, I don't believe we're allowed to be.
But they'll put tenants in there. They'll put people from social justice tribunals that come from the government with their mindset of, trying to keep people.
But they are not landlords. They do not own this magical money tree called land. That just, you go into the back and you dig a little hole, because it's not a money tree. Everybody would have seen the tree. So it's actually a pit.
Yep.
And we all dig in there. We go grab a couple $1,000s, come back. No problem, tenant. I went into my money pit. I got your rent for this month. I can pay my mortgage. All's good. Don't worry.
Well, we're working on this document. We're providing my feedback through a document, but I highly encourage each and every one of you to provide your feedback through this consultation, if they're going to listen to you or not, or it's just going to they're going to twist what we're going to say to them and do something the complete opposite. But at least you can sleep at night knowing that you've tried to be that voice and someone of reason, someone of common sense. So make sure that you put that in there. And Lena, we got so hard into the concept of this consultation, but I wanted everyone to know about flex space. Me and you get on the phone and I get really excited when she's talking. I'm like, no. I'm like, wait, can't tell me any more about flex space. I want to be able to have this through the conversation right now, because it's about tools. It's about now utilizing our tools in front of us as landlords while we're dealing with this crazy broken system that is honestly even becoming a safety concern for some of us. So, describe what flex space is.
Okay, so in a nutshell, flex space is actually a co-working space in Richmond Hill, right? So we are a physical co-working space. People come in, they plug, they play for the day. However, we also offer like mailing addresses, just like Canada Post does with their little PO boxes and UPS does. However, our addresses are tied to clearly a physical address. And we've created landlord geared solutions. So I've been a landlord almost 20 years, and I have never had a tenant who had my personal home address. I've never had a tenant who's had my personal work address. I've never been in a situation where my tenant was able to get in a car and drive to me and find me. And I think that that's important.
Very important.
I think it's very, very, and I think it's more important today than it was 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. I think it's so much more important today than it was 20 years ago. As a property,
stay.
Yeah. Right? So you don't want people to be able to find you, but not only do you not want people to be able to find you, you want to be able that if your tenant comes. So if your tenant shows up at Canada Post at Shoppers Drug Mart, and what are they going to do? They're going to yell at your PO box. You know what I mean? They're going to be even more irate.
Yep.
Now they're even more pissed. You sent me to a box at Shoppers Drug Mart. You are a and now they're even more irate, and all of this is getting fueled up. So FlexSpace has me.
You just do security.
I mean, we do actually. It's really funny. It's really cute. We do have we have a guy there who is security, and he takes care of me when need be. But the point is that when you have an address where somebody can physically come into, and the person that they're dealing with is not the person that they're mad at, and the person that they're dealing with can speak the language and understand what it is that they are saying, and is able to de-escalate the situation, that individual who came in there irate is now going to be more sound in their mind before they decide to now try and have another conversation with you. So that's one of the things that we do with FlexSpace is we give you an address where if your tenant wants to come in and scream and yell, they can. And there's
serve documents. You want to serve documents?
The second is the documents, right? So documentation, when you have a PO box, when you have all of these things, or even if you have like a virtual address, you have to physically go and check your mail, right? So what we have is we have everything done on an app. So instantly when your mail comes in, you get a notification. It's a picture of your envelope and it says, you got mail. And you take a look at this envelope and you decide what it is that you want us to do with it. Do you want us to send it to you by Purolator overnight? Do you want to come and pick it up? Do you want me to open it, scan it, and then shred it? Whatever you want, you have your mail instantly and you don't have to leave. So I remember way back in the day when hearings were getting issued within 6 to 8 weeks, there were times where because I hadn't checked the mail right on like every single day, I might not have gotten my notice until 2 weeks before my hearing date. Right. And then sometimes it was like, because it was getting rerouted to me, it took 3 days to get to my office. And then it took my office another 3 days to get to me. And now all of a sudden the time I thought I have, I don't have. And so it eliminates that, right? It eliminates that. And then because your mail comes in there, we can offer you into bookkeeping, right? So every landlord needs to know how much money they make, but if you can't keep your books, how do you know how much you've got? And it's a pain in the ass and Excel sucks. But who can afford to retain a bookkeeper, right? Full time. So we offer that and it's actually billed by the minute, right? So a landlord can come in and you might use like, an hour a month for bookkeeping and it'll cost you like $40, but your books are reconciled. You're able to pull your reports. You know how much money came in, how much money went out, where you spent it. Is it a capital expenditure? Is it not? We sit down, we help you build your chart of accounts so that you know how to categorize it. And then that way it's just ready to go to your accountant. And now you're saving money that way because your accountant's not trying to clean up your books.
Nice.
Right. We provide phone services, right? So if you need a tenant to be able to call you without having your personal cell phone number.
Yes.
Because you want to be able to control it, we have that as an option, right? Like we have an option for you to go in there. We have an option for them to actually dial into our property management company before they get forwarded to you. So we're providing landlords with an ability to give themselves a bit of a step back so that there's a buffer between them and the tenant that they're dealing with, so that there's a cool down period. Think of it like that, the fire air gap that they have in between like townhomes and whatnot. And you've got to have that little gap in order to let the fire just kind of like cool down before it burns down the rest of the place.
Yeah.
This is what we're trying to create, right? So you've got a heated tenant, you have an emotional landlord, and we're trying to create that little separation so that everybody has a chance to calm down before they continue a conversation without you're stealing from me and you're trying to get rich because you're an evil, money hungry, whatever, and vice versa. So that's what we do at FlexSpace.
And even for the phone side of things, just knowing that you're looking more professional when you're doing it as well. And you're not having you're the type of landlord when a tenant is giving you that sass and giving you that attitude, and you're going to read that message and they're messaging you at 11 o'clock at night. You're almost like becoming that, property manager when you need them. It's not so much of the fact that, sometimes landlords get property managers because they don't want the tenant to know who they are. They don't want to be burdened by the calls or by the mail that's coming in there. Now, you mentioned to me on the phone when it comes down with the accounting part of it and being able to process, the bill side. So you'd be able to highlight some inefficiencies within your billing.
So when we're doing that, so again, we run a property management company. I run a full service management company. So I look at gas bills and water bills and electric bills in volume. So it's very easy to see if there's an abuse or irregular behavior or just inefficiency. So there could be things just like a running toilet that a tenant may not notice, right? That's costing you money. It's very easy to tell if your tenant's got swimming pools in the backyard. You know what I mean? They put in a new air conditioner that you weren't aware of. I mean, we caught a guy this is when it was illegal, but he started growing, like, for personal use, but marijuana in a closet in the basement. And it was one hydro bill and we were able to catch it. So when you have an experienced team who's coming in there, they're able then to sit and say to you, hey, listen, we just got your gas bill. The cubic usage is double what you used for the same period last year. Please call the gas company and find out if they misread your meter.
Happens all the time.
Right? Or is there an issue? Did you want us to contact your tenant to find out if they can smell some gas or anything like that outside to see if there's a reason why? Because it doesn't make sense. So we offer that as well because it's all getting processed through our system. So the people who are going through and doing that are already doing it on a large scale.
Wow. See? Yeah. It's this guy. I put the link for FlexSpace into the chat there, guys. I also have it in the description. So take a look at FlexSpace and how
the website itself doesn't have all of this in there, only because like it's very difficult and it's a very unique kind of a thing. But we do have something that we put together actually for your conference back last October that we have available. And if you guys, the contact information is there and you want to sit down and discuss your own personal thing, our goal is to create self-management solutions. Because property managers are expensive when they're good. It's very important when they're good, they're expensive. And in today's market, it's not always viable.
It's about pivoting. It's about looking at what the market's doing with our interest rates rising, how much, our rental rate is, the utilities are increasing. When you got to pinch, you got to pinch.
Yeah.
And this is a way that, people can pitch on certain, services that is required through there. And also always encouraging.
Still have it on demand, right? Like you've got property managers that are available to you. So if you have an issue, right, you have a tenant screening question. As an example, I screen, God, I have like 14 applications in my box right now. You know what I mean? Like I screen probably 30 applications a week.
Oh yeah. It's crazy.
Spotting fake documentation, easy. Partially because I run payroll. So I know what payroll looks like. Week after week after week. I know what a remittance form, like I know what these things look like. So as a new landlord who may not have those supports, why not have somebody that you can call and say, hey, can I send you something that you can take a look at and give me your opinion?
Yeah. And it's happening so much. It's not even funny how often it is coming with these fake documents. Desperate times call for desperate measures.
And it's not just tenants. There are agencies who are working together. And I said this at your conference. A lot of us think, oh no, not me. But there are agencies who are purposely coming in and acting as a tenant to place somebody who would generally not be serviced into your units. So I saw a question about where we're located. I am physically located in Vaughan. Our company, the management company, actually covers all, like from Oshawa all the way up to Niagara Falls, up to Newmarket, Barrie, and out to Brantford, and then Ottawa and the entire Ottawa and Eastern 401 corridor. So we've got a very large reach. We've got service teams in each of those places, but I'm physically myself in Vaughan. But I mean, hey, we can help in a majority of places.
Well, we definitely put the link there for, I'm putting the link now to your property management in the comments there, as well as obviously front lobby popping up there. So if you use OLW15, you can get a $15 credit when you sign up for the premium account, but you don't even have to be a premium user. And you can get a really, the one of the cheapest credit checks that are around that cover a full detailed tenancy record from Landlord Credit Bureau and the long form Equifax credit check. And making sure you're looking at the trade lines, and not everyone is allowed to report to the credit bureaus with a trade line. So when you are doing your rent reporting, report it to the company where it counts. We need to make sure that we're staying established and connected to one another. So check out there with Front Lobby as well. And Seth, I was just talking to Seth Ferguson, and he's having a multifamily conference. So if you're still not afraid of rental units in Ontario,
and you shouldn't be.
you
You shouldn't be.
You just need some education and making
That's
sure that
all
you know
that it
what.
is.
That's all it is. It's
all
about
that it
management.
is.
It's like
if we have all managed to somehow survive, you know what I mean?
Yep. We're still doing it. There's lots of different.
We're still laughing. We're still laughing about it. Like
and drinking.
Hey. That's okay. It's okay.
My colleague's unable to listen in tonight. This is being recorded so he can listen in when he gets home, of course. So check out the Ontario Landlords Watch YouTube channel. Let me see if I can put that into this right now so you can have a quick link. As long as my music wasn't blaring from earlier when I was doing my report for the government and drinking at the same time. It should sound good. So I'll keep you guys in the loop on that.
If I can just say one thing to Kayla, you and talking about reporting to that trade line. I know that not everybody appreciates how important that is, but I want everybody who is listening to take one thing back with them that maybe possibly hasn't crossed your mind. And that's the worst tenants that you might ever encounter. And the people who will never, ever, ever pay you rent have the best credit. Because they pay everything else. They will pay their cars. They will pay everything else because they know that that is what is being used to screen them. So they have jobs, they make money.
Yeah.
They have great credit, but they will never pay you. So if now maybe you're not an experienced landlord and maybe that's something that they sense, but as an inexperienced landlord, let's say you come back and you say, just so you're aware, rent payments are reported to your credit line every single month. That individual who values their credit, because that's how they are able to live for free year after year after year, is going to get somebody else that they're going to take advantage of, right? Like we talk a lot about, poor, inexperienced landlords, they get taken advantage of. They do. And this could be your one saving grace, because those really horrible, that sliver of really bad tenant have the best credit.
And you know what? That's why when you're doing the tenant screening, putting that into your rental ad, that you do it to stop them from even coming. But if they do come to your unit explaining what monthly rent reporting is about, that's when you'll be so excited for this rental unit. They love it. It fits their needs. How can I fill out a rental application? And then you explain to them what rent reporting is about. And now all of a sudden they want to take the rental application with them. So it's a tool that all of us should be using. I wish the government did their part and inform everybody about rent reporting with Front Lobby, and understanding that some of them are also, there's programs out there. Like there was a comment with rental guarantee, and you're losing 5% of your income to go on a rental guarantee program, but through the fine print and the underwriting, the qualifications that are needed is almost like it's going to be less than nothing to that person defaulting, and you're just wasting money. Just step up your screening process, making sure that you go with your gut, dig right in. Don't take anything that comes from the tenant, from their credit check, and they give you a copy of it or whatnot. It's obviously, it's easily fraudulently being created. So making sure that you're pulling your own typical credit check. But I think this is probably one of the longest Facebook Lives that we've done. I said,
you don't talk much, Kayla. How is that possible?
I said, Lena, it's going to be about 30 minutes, an hour.
I think my husband's been texting me to be like, do we want to go for dinner? We had an event all afternoon with our MPP, our local MPP, and one of the associate ministers from our provincial cabinet. And we didn't finish till 5:00. It went like 2 hours over and nobody's eaten in my house. I see all these messages coming through.
Well, don't stop the comments, guys. We may not be able to, get them in tonight, but I know that, we're still watching, sharing this video with your elected officials, share it with other landlords for them to share it, to get our voices, to encourage other landlords to get out there, to speak up against this unjust treatment that our province is doing to our housing providers, because we want to be able to speak up, not just for the landlord community, but we're speaking up for the good tenants that are out there. And we're also speaking up for the taxpayers who have their elected officials wasting their money on putting band-aid solutions on here. So it's going to be all hands on deck for us to come out and tell our government what is needed, because this is our business. Who else better to listen to than the business people? And we want our government to treat rental housing as a business and not just so much as an investment, because it's a necessity and it's something that should be protected. And in order to protect our housing stock, you need to protect your housing providers, so your housing providers can protect the tenants. So I want to thank you, Lena. You're amazing. I want to have you back on because there's another thing with the states and, another different social, program that's working in the states that could be easily adapted here in Canada. And it's something our government should be worrying about. But there's only 24 hours in a day. We have swimming, we have basketball, we have supper, we have rentals to do, birthday parties. We're busy landlords trying to do everything. Now, how can people find you, Lena?
I think the easiest way would probably be through social media. So my name, you can see that. You'll find me on social media. Connect with me that way. Otherwise, you can just email me. It's my first name, Lena, Lena, at N like Nancy, V like Victor, P like Peter, M like Mary.ca.
Perfect. And everyone, you know how to find me on Facebook, Kayla Andrade. I'm almost at my limit of accepting friend requests, so I apologize if you're waiting for me to accept you. I guess you can also follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and making sure that you're subscribing to the YouTube channel and making sure that landlords, you're speaking up, because if you don't, you're going to lose it. And we can't even afford to lose a single landlord in Ontario right now. So we're doing this for the betterment of all of the community members all across Ontario and even Canada for that matter. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Please subscribe, share. Time to make some noise. So I want to thank you all for watching this long segment, but it's definitely, I hope you find it very valuable. And if you did, put us in the comments and let us know that you're liking and you want more, and what more do you want? Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.